She was fired from the job where she had worked for 15 years as soon as her boss found out she was pregnant. "You are useless now," he said without hesitation. She left devastated, carrying the pain of being discarded at the most delicate moment of her life. But 5 days later, the unexpected happened. The company called. Not to apologize, but to beg her to come back. Hello, my friends. I am Linda, and this is the Linda's Stories channel. I hope you enjoy this story. Grace Thompson woke up before the alarm, as she had been doing for the last 15 years. It was a habit cultivated since childhood, when she accompanied her farmer parents at dawn to work in the fields. In the small town where she grew up, she learned that the sun waits for no one, and that honest work was the only guaranteed inheritance her parents could leave her. The modest apartment on the 3rd floor of a building without an elevator did not compare to the vastness of the farm where she grew up, but it had enough comfort for her and James, her husband of 7 years. He was still asleep when she quietly slipped out of bed, took a quick shower, and prepared a strong coffee. She dressed in the same kind of clothes she wore every day, a knee-length skirt, button-up shirt, and a simple blazer. Nothing attention-grabbing, but everything impeccably neat. By the time she left to catch the subway at 6:30 a.m., Grace had already mentally reviewed all of the day's tasks. As an executive secretary at Star Corporation, she was responsible not only for the schedule of Richard Blake, the director of the finance department, but also for the organization of various operations that kept the sector running like clockwork. "Good morning, Mr. Leonard," greeted the doorman of the commercial building where she worked. "Mrs. Grace, always the first. One day you're going to get a key to this building," joked the grey-haired man who had been there as long as she had. Grace smiled. It was true. In 15 years she had never been late, not even on the day when a storm knocked down trees and flooded half the city. She had simply left 2 hours earlier, arriving soaked but punctual. At her desk, even before turning on the computer, Grace took a small envelope out of her bag. Inside it was the confirmation that would change her life. She was 8 weeks pregnant. She and James had been trying for 2 years, and finally the dream was coming true. She carefully put the envelope away and began her routine, deciding she would share the news with Richard at the right moment. The morning went as usual. Grace organized folders, answered calls, filtered emails, corrected presentations, and rephrased arguments that Richard would use in the meeting with investors. When he arrived at 9:15 a.m., his coffee was at the exact temperature, and a summary of the day's main information was already on his desk. "Good morning, Grace. We have the presentation today, right?" he asked, without lifting his eyes from his phone. "Yes, sir. I've already checked the data and updated the charts that had outdated information. I also included a comparative analysis that I believe will impress the investors." He nodded absent-mindedly, as if that was the minimum expected. Grace was already accustomed to it. Throughout all those years she had learned to recognize her own invisibility, essential but rarely noticed. At 11 a.m. the meeting room was impeccable. Documents organized, presentation loaded, coffee and water served exactly how each director preferred. Grace knew all the details, all the preferences. When the meeting started, she remained discreet in a corner, taking notes. It was during that presentation that Richard shone with the material she had prepared. As the investors applauded the projected growth chart, Grace felt a small wave of pride mixed with a familiar melancholy. Those ideas were hers. Those strategies had emerged during her overtime hours, studying data when everyone else had already left. At the end of the meeting, while the executives congratulated each other, the CEO approached Richard. "Excellent work. That comparative analysis was brilliant. Where did you get that idea?" Richard smiled, adjusting his tie. "Sometimes inspiration just comes, doesn't it?" Grace in the background only smiled. It was always like this. She wasn't just a message taker. She was the brains behind many strategies that boosted entire departments. For 15 years, she dedicated herself to the company, organized processes, created routines, optimized results. Every impeccable presentation, every chart that impressed the directors in meetings, It all went through her hands, but she never took the credit. It went to the men in suits whom she helped appear brilliant. Even so, Grace smiled. She dreamed of the day when an opportunity would arise for her to grow. She humbly and hopefully asked for a chance. "It's not the time yet," they said. 3 weeks later, Grace finally gathered the courage to share the news. She waited until the end of the workday, when Richard was usually more relaxed. "Mr. Richard, can I speak with you for a minute?" He gestured for her to come in while he continued typing something on the computer. "It's something quick. She took a deep breath. "Would like to announce that I'm pregnant. I'm still in the first trimester, but I've already started planning how to organize everything for my maternity leave. I intend to train someone to temporarily replace me and—" It was then that Richard looked up from the screen, interrupting her with a look Grace had never seen before. It wasn't anger, nor irritation. It was something worse. Disappointment. "Pregnant?" he repeated as if he couldn't believe it. "After 15 years you decide it's a good idea to get pregnant now? Right when we're in the middle of the biggest project of the decade?" Grace felt as if she had been slapped. "Sir, I've planned everything. I'll make sure nothing is left pending. I still have 6 months to—" "6 months?" He laughed, but there was no humor in his voice. "Grace, do you really think you'll be able to keep up with the pace we need when you're like that?" He made a vague gesture toward her belly, still imperceptible under the blazer. "I've always handled everything, sir. I've never disappointed you in 15 years, she replied, trying to keep her voice steady. "That was before." He sighed, closing the laptop. "Look, let's be practical. You're no use now, not in the way we need." The words fell like stones on Grace. She felt a lump in her throat, but years of self-discipline stopped her from crying right there. "If you give me a chance, I can prove that." "It's not a matter of chance, Grace. It's simple math. You're going to step away. You'll come back different with your mind elsewhere. The company can't afford to wait." It was a rainy Thursday when Grace left the company for the last time. All the paperwork was in order, severance pay, termination fine, everything according to the law. Richard wasn't even present to say goodbye. He sent the company's lawyer to conduct the process with maximum discretion and efficiency. Richard decided to dismiss her, convinced that everything would resolve easily. All it took was training someone younger, with a lower salary and full of energy. After all, he believed that enthusiasm and eagerness to learn would be enough to fill the void she would leave. Grace cleaned her desk with the same organization as always. She only packed a small plant that Mr. Leonard had given her years ago, a cactus that survived with little water and light. "Just like you," he would joke. As she left the keys on the empty desk and thanked the receptionist, who looked at her with a mix of pity and embarrassment. Outside, the rain poured mercilessly. Grace opened her umbrella and felt, for the first time, a slight stirring in her belly, as if the baby wanted to remind her, "Mum, you're not alone." James was waiting at home with an embrace that seemed to want to protect her from the entire world. Tall, with the broad shoulders of someone who worked with his hands, he was a mechanic at a small but respected workshop. They had met when Grace's car broke down on the way to work, and he helped her not only by fixing the vehicle, but also by offering her a ride so she wouldn't be late. "They don't deserve you, love," he said, holding her face between his calloused hands. They never did. Grace finally allowed the tears to fall, not out of despair, but from a mixture of relief and fear. "What are we going to do now, James? We had everything planned, the leave, the return." He guided her to the sofa, sitting down next to her and holding her hands. "We'll do what we've always done. Keep moving forward. The shop is doing well. We have our savings." He smiled, running his hand over her belly. "And now we have an even greater reason to be strong." That night, after James fell asleep, Grace stayed up staring at the ceiling. For the first time in 15 years, she wouldn't have to wake up before the alarm, wouldn't have to rush to the subway, wouldn't need to anticipate other people's needs. It was frightening, and in some way, liberating. "We'll be fine, little one," she whispered to her belly. "Mommy promises." 5 days. That was how long the supposed dispensability of Grace lasted. The phone call came as she was organising the baby's room, sorting out what she would need to buy in the coming months. "Hello, Grace. This is Karen from HR at Star Corporation." Grace felt a strange shiver. Karen was the same person who had conducted her dismissal. "Yes, Karen, how can I help you?" "We are calling to offer you an opportunity." The woman's voice was artificially cheerful. "We thought of you fondly. The company cares about your well-being and would like to propose a return under special conditions." Grace sat on the newly made bed, instinctively caressing her belly. "What do you mean?" She had been laid off a few days ago and now they wanted her back. "What conditions would those be?" she asked, trying to understand the situation. "Well, you could return to your position with the same salary." Karen paused. "Of course, with some adjustments for your current condition." Grace closed her eyes. Even over the phone, she could feel the other woman's discomfort talking about pregnancy, as if it were an illness. "Was it Richard who asked for this call?" "He mentioned that it would be good to have you back, yes." Grace almost laughed. Richard, the man who didn't have the courage even to say goodbye to her in person, now didn't have the courage to make this invitation directly. The truth was that the department turned into chaos after she left. Processes stalled, deadlines were missed, and no one could handle the workload like she did. The boss, too embarrassed to admit the mistake, asked someone else to call. The voice on the other end of the line was coated with forced kindness, as if they were doing her a favour. Not a word about the losses, the failures, or the mess that had ensued. They pretended to be extending a helping hand, when in reality they were trying to put out the fire they had let start. But Grace was smart. She understood very well what was happening. "I appreciate the call, Karen, but at the moment my priority is my son. I thought the company cared about my journey, but I was wrong. Now those who need me will have to wait." After hanging up, Grace felt a lightness she hadn't experienced in years. For the first time, she had said no to something she didn't want to do. For the first time, she had chosen herself. The following months passed at a different pace. Grace took the opportunity to visit her parents in the countryside, to tidy up the house at her leisure, to read books she had wanted to read for years. The severance money, combined with the savings she had always maintained, gave her and James temporary security. The phone rang several times. First Karen, then someone from accounting, then a guy from the legal department. All with the same request disguised as concern. "We need your help with some files. Could you explain how that spreadsheet works?" "It's just a quick consultation." Grace attended to some of these requests, always by phone, always without accepting payment. She did it not for Richard or the company, but out of respect for what she had built over 15 years. It was her work, her legacy, and she didn't want to see it completely fall apart. Elijah was born on a quiet October dawn. A baby with round cheeks and a curious gaze that seemed to absorb the entire world. Holding him for the first time, Grace was absolutely certain. All the choices she made over the years were worth it, even if she had been undervalued, because she stayed true to herself, and that was the most important thing. When Elijah turned 8 months old, she decided to start looking for a job. Her mother, who was also her best friend, offered to take care of her grandson. She was enamored with the little one, and for her there was no sacrifice in it. It was pure love to take care of her grandchild. She hadn't sent out any resumes yet. She was just thinking, taking a deep breath before the next step. And then one day the phone rang. But this time it was different. "Hi, Grace. This is from Wells and Carter Agency. Your friend Madison recommended you for a position we've been looking to fill for weeks. She spoke about your experience, your competence, and honestly, we were interested just from her recommendation. Would you be available to talk?" Grace's heart raced. It wasn't just any offer. It was a position to coordinate a small project team, with flexible hours and the possibility of a few days of working from home. The salary, better than she had imagined, and above all, respect was part of the package. The following week, she started. And when she left the house for the first time with her briefcase in hand, she felt whole again, not because she was returning to the job market, but because she was finally being seen. Not as someone replaceable, but as someone who was missed, who added value. This time, it wasn't a return. It was a new beginning. And everything she was, everything she had built with effort and integrity over the years, finally blossomed. If you enjoyed the story, please leave a comment with a rating from 1 to 5 to show how much you liked it. Also, watch the video that is now appearing on your screen. See you soon.